a little message come up on your screen. Brilliant. Okay. So firstly, just want to thank you all for coming along. I do appreciate it. What I try to do is I try to sort of get through these presentations really within sort of half an hour or so. There's an opportunity for you to ask questions whenever you want to ask a question. If I say something that you'd like to just a bit of clarification on, that's fine. And then I also do have a point during the presentations where you can ask questions as well. So a little bit about me. What I do is I do a lot of work around helping people grow their businesses. And I work on a lot of it is about business growth and personal development, and basically supporting business owners to implement skills within their business and really helping them to put a foundation for their business more than anything else. Now, one of the common problems that I think a lot of people experience within business is the generation of new business. It's the hardest business to find and try to secure and everything. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to be looking at part of the sales process that I personally believe is the most important part, which is qualification. So we'll look at we'll look at why it's so important. And then what we'll do is we'll look at the things that you need to do to ensure that you're qualifying your opportunities properly. And then how that can actually form a foundation for the rest of your sales process moving forward and the sales conversations that you have. So what I shall do is I shall move on to the next slide. So for those of you that know me and those of you that have worked with me or those of you who've been on these presentations before, you'll probably recognize this graphic. So this is a typical simplified sales funnel, and it highlights basically the 6 stages of a typical sales process. So last time we talked a lot about prospecting and how you can go about prospecting. And then this is the stage that the next stage that you go on to really is the qualification process, which is really split down into 2 parts. So in qualification, it's basically the part of the process that determines whether you're a good fit for a company, and this is something that's really important, it's never really talked about, and whether they are a good fit for you, whether they're the type of client that you want, particularly if you're in a service-based business. And you end up building some kind of personal relationship with that individual that you're working with. So you've got these 2 parts of the process in pre-qualification and qualification, and they are 2 distinct different areas of the same thing, but they are all about building a picture and giving you a picture of the type of client that you're working with. So let's look at pre-qualification first. So this is the part of the process where really what you're doing is you're doing your own desk research, if you like, into the prospect that you're talking to. So for the purpose of this exercise, let's assume you found a prospect who you think they could be a good client. They've a requirement for your services, and they are definitely on your radar. So the first question you need to ask yourself is this: are they a right fit for you? So I believe that's really, really important, because when you're working with people, the last thing you want to do is work with a client that actually is going to be a pain. So what you have to do is you have to determine whether they are right for you. And there are several things that you can look for to really understand this. And a lot of this, like I say, is desk research that you can do yourself. Some of these questions you may actually end up asking or finding out when you're actually chatting to the individual that you're talking to. But before you even go down that route, the first thing you've got to ask yourself is, are they in the right industry for you? Particularly if you're niching in an industry and you're serving that industry. Some people really like to work in a very, very industry specific way, because what it does is it gives them expertise in working in that particular industry. They get to know the challenges and the problems that their potential clients face. If you're working in an industry, or if your prospect is an industry that you feel you're not going to be able to help them in, or you feel completely out of your depth in, then that might be a red flag for you, where you don't want to do it, don't want to work with them. The next question is, are they the right size of organization for you? So for me personally, I work with micro businesses and sole traders. They're the types of individuals that I work best with. So businesses with maybe up to 10 employees, and people who work on their own as well. But some people I know like to work for corporates. Some people like to work for businesses that have a turnover, a specified turnover. So you have to determine as to whether they are the right sized of organization for you. The next thing you need to be asking yourself is, am I speaking to the right person? There's absolutely no point you speaking to somebody who is, for example, you're speaking to somebody in sales when they've not got the position to make a buying decision or something like that. So you have to speak to somebody who's able to sign the deal off and make sure that you're speaking to that right individual. Now, it might be that your route into the organization is through somebody in a different department or somebody who's, let's say, lower down the organizational hierarchy or something along those sorts of lines. But actually, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're having a conversation with them and also the decision maker at the same time. So that's another important point: is, are you speaking to somebody, the right individual? If you offer credit to your clients, as a lot of people tend to do they have a good credit rating? You can use tools out there. There's many tools out there. One of the more popular ones is something called Credit Safe, and you can find that out. And Credit Safe, what it does is it gives you a credit rating of the individual, and it also, or the business that you're dealing with, and it also gives an indication of how good a payer they are, so how regularly they pay on time or whatever. And it uses a very simple traffic light system. Green, I think, is typically over 70%. 70% in terms of paying on time. Then they have an amber, and then they have a red. And you want to try and avoid the reds. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a situation that I had in a previous business that I was running, where we took on a client that we thought was a fantastic client. You know, we thought they were going to paying their bills on time. We thought there was going to be loads and loads of work there and everything else. And there was a lot of work there. Now, at the time, we were factoring our sales ledger, doing invoice discounting, which is where you receive a percentage of your invoice against the invoice that you're sending out. What that did was that masked the fact that this client wasn't actually paying us. And after 90 days, this client decided that they actually ended up going into liquidation because they couldn't carry on. And they effectively left us with a deficit of 3 weeks worth of cash flow. Now, at the time, we were in a very difficult situation ourselves. Money was tight. It was at the end of the 2012 recession. And unfortunately, what that did was that was enough to take us under. So that's a very extreme example of not doing your research properly and not checking into that particular client. Now, 3 months before that, had we checked into that client, we could have probably avoided that situation. So that's the importance of actually really finding out whether they are going to be a good client or whether they're going to be somebody who's going to mess you around. Then the next question is, are they going to pay on your terms? So again, when you're dealing with particularly with larger companies, some of the corporates, what they'll do is they'll demand that you have something like, for example, 30 days credit terms with them. Or sometimes they'll go, we want 60 days credit or something like that. Or they'll say the classic one is 30 days net, which basically means that they'll pay you at the end of every month. And if your invoice, that they want 30 days, they will pay you 30 days from the end of the month that you invoice them, which can stretch to 60 days. So if those credit terms don't fit with you, then that's something that will affect your cash flow and will be a problem. Now, we also had another client that we were once working with, they were a large print management company. And one of the problems that we had with them was they decided that their terms are 30 days net. But the other thing they used to do is they used to stretch out their payments, usually to about 90 to sometimes 120 days, which had a major impact on our cash flow. And it was an issue, but they used to put a lot of work our way. And the way we kind of equalized it with ourselves is once we got over that first 120 days, we would be regularly getting paid. And then they decided that they were going to slap something in called a retrospective rebate, which is essentially at the end of each year, if you would give them 5% back on their invoices that they've been paying over the course of that year. which was a real pain, particularly when you get to December and it's a quieter or a shorter month, and then you get a bill for 5% of £100,000 worth of business, obviously 5 grand that you've got to then pay them back, and that was the terms that they had. Now there are ways around that. There's a legal thing called the Battle of Terms. So if you actually send your terms and conditions with your invoice, and they send their terms and conditions back to you, and you send your terms and conditions back. Basically, the last exchange of terms and conditions is where you stand legally. It's all very well and good, but then you've got to have the pockets deep enough to fight that against a corporate. So make sure that the terms and conditions you are signing up to fit with what you expect and what you want to do. The next thing to think about really is do your company values fit with their company values, or do your values fit with the values of the people that you're working with? This is really, really important, because if they don't, how are you going to actually build a relationship with that individual, or how are they going to understand where you're coming from? Or alternatively, how are you going to understand where they're coming from? So company values are really, really crucial. And you can do that by getting a feel for the individual, by doing your research, by going on their website, by looking at their social media, but all of those sorts of things, and seeing the sorts of posts that they're putting on social media. That will give you an indication of the type of company values that they have. If you're very, very ecologically minded, and this company, I don't know, they're manufacturing plastic, for example, then are they going to be fitting with you? You know, that their ethos may not work with your ethos. So have a really good look into that and make sure you understand that. This is more of a personal one, is are they going to respect your opinion as the expert? Are they going to allow you to guide them in the way that you know is the correct way to be working? Because if they're not going to do that, then you're going to be finding that you're butting your head against a wall the whole time, which is something that you really don't want to be doing. Another thing to think about is what sort of reputation do they have? So if they have a really, really solid reputation as being a great company to work with, then fantastic. If they've got a reputation for being a bit difficult, or being awkward, or being a late payer, or whatever that might be, again, you can question as to whether you want to be actually working with with those people. Here's an interesting one as well. Have they used one of your competitors previously? And if so, what are their reasons for moving to somebody else? So it may be a case that their previous supplier actually sacked them and didn't want to work with them. It may be that they didn't get what they wanted out of their previous supplier. Now, they will probably tell you that as to why they've gone across. But what you've got to do is you've got to be very careful in understanding why that is the case. Now, again, I'm going to give you another example. We took on a major uh, a major client who is in the office consumable sector. And what we were doing is we were supplying them with floppy diskettes. So those of you old enough on the call to remember what a floppy diskette looks like, it was a little 3¼ inch hard plastic thing that you used to put into your computer. But anyway, so we used to supply them with branded floppy diskettes that were blank, that were formatted, that would sit in boxes, and we used to supply them with CDs and DVDs and all of that sort of stuff. Now, when we took them on, they told us that they would be doing around about £600,000 worth of business a year, and we had to be very, very keen on the pricing to make sure that that worked. Now, if they were placing 600 grand worth of business with us, we would have been making quite a healthy net profit on that side of things. But the break-even point for us was actually around about £450,000. So obviously, as you can see, it was quite a major contract. However, the problem was that in the first year, they actually only did about £400,000 with us. So as a result of that, we were losing money, and we were losing money hand over fist on a monthly basis. Now, had we done our research properly, we would have spoken to the company that gave the contract up previously to ask them why. When we spoke to the company after we'd taken the contract on, and we were struggling with getting them to place the orders through that they were wanting to place, or we wanted them to place, we found out the reason was because they always overestimated what they were going to be turning over in terms of in orders placing, as a tool to try and get the pricing. So they actually were a very, very bad fit for us. So we ended up sacking them as a client. So again, but it was a costly exercise, and it ended up costing us quite a few £1,000s to make sure that we do that. So again, it's so important that you do that research and you find that information out. So again, do they have a clear objective of what they want to, do they have a clear objective of what they want to achieve when working with you? Again, that's something else that you can do. Can you help them? Are you able to help them? And the last point really here is the work that you're doing with them going to be financially worthwhile? Is it going to be worth your reputation? Is it going to be good for your reputation? Is it something that you're going to be able to shout about? Are there going to be further opportunities when you work with them? So a lot of this information that I've just given you there, you can find a lot of that out basically before you even speak to them. Some of it you won't be able to, some of it you will. I actually do a webinar called Getting Rid of Clients to Grow Your Business. And it's based around sacking your C clients and turning your B clients into A clients. And what you're doing here with this pre-qualification element is avoiding the point of taking C clients on. So that's the whole principle that you're trying to sort of think about. Now, has anybody got any questions on that? Because that sort of like outlines the pre-qualification side of things. Has anybody got any questions? There's lots of shaking of heads. Fantastic. Okay, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but we'll carry on. So the next point I want to talk about really is about having quality qualification with people. So incredibly important when you're actually talking to the individuals that you're talking to. It's the one opportunity that you have to really find out what is important to the client, and this process shouldn't be rushed. It's about having excellent conversation with people, and it's about building relationships. So these are the things that you're really sort of focusing on here. Excellent conversation in the fact that you're trying to find out what the client is looking for, building relationships to the point where you know that this is a client that you want to be working with, and actually this is a client that they want to work with you. So that's really what you're trying to assess during this whole qualification element. And you're also trying to understand exactly what they want as well. So buyers are generally quite savvy. Gone are the days when, you know, you'd have your double glazing salespeople and they'd manage to convince people to take double glazing on. They didn't really need it, or whatever that might be. People do not buy something they do not need. And that's something that I think is really, really important to recognize. You can't do the hard sell anymore. And that's a good thing, because the hard sell wasn't, when you did a hard sell on people, they weren't getting the value out of what you were doing or whatever. So people will not buy something that you don't need. However, your solution needs to improve their business or their life or whatever it is you're particularly promoting. And what you have to do is you have to really understand how it's going to improve their life or their business, and that will make it more likely for them to buy. You need to build that rapport, you need to build that relationship, and they have to actually have that connection with you. So the easiest way to do this is to use open-ended questions. Now, open-ended questions are questions that start with one of those 6 words: what, why, how, where, when, or who. The reason you use those questions is those questions can't be answered with a yes or a no, and they're fantastic conversation starters. And I want to emphasize that word conversation, because that's what you're trying to achieve with this individual. You're trying to achieve a 2-way conversation with them. And open-ended questions will help you lead with that. Now, if you're having a conversation with somebody and you're not sure, or if you're about to have a conversation with somebody and you're not sure how to start that conversation with them before you do it, one of the things that I suggest is people make a little note in their pad or in their post-it notes or whatever it is. If you're on a Zoom call, you can be maybe putting some post-it notes around your screen. If you're meeting with them face to face, you can have a notepad on your lap and you can just write some open-ended questions in there. And they will give you the opportunity to prompt you in starting that conversation with somebody. And I think that's really important, because often we don't know necessarily how we're going to start the conversation. When you ask that question, the next thing that you need to do, and this is a really, really difficult thing to do, is to be quiet, because you've asked a question for a reason and you want your prospect to fill that silence. And they will be able to give you a lot of information in that time. And I think the thing is, silence is actually, I always say this to people that I'm working with, when you're doing sales, silence is actually your biggest friend, because if you can sit comfortably in silence, you can almost guarantee the person that you're talking to won't be able to sit as comfortably in that silence as well. So what they will do is they will talk, they will fill the space, and they will give you a lot of information at that point that you can make notes on, and you can sort of go back to, and you can find out, and you can delve deeper and everything else. So that's the thing. So ask a question and then keep quiet. And I think that's really, really necessary. It's a necessary skill to practice. I'll promise you, it's not a comfortable skill to do, but when you do it and you do it well, it works very, very well. Always have an objective to the questions you're asking. So if you know you know what you want to find out, so have that. If that's the information that you're wanting to find out, that's the objective of your question. For example, you will not get in a car with a destination in mind and not know where you're going. And sales is no different. You know where you want to take this conversation to. You might want to, it might be that you have a very, very fast sales lead time. It might mean that your sales lead time takes a bit longer. So your objective is to lead it to the opportunity for them to ask you to give you a quote or whatever it might be. But always have an objective in what you're doing. Like I say, I always allow the open-ended questions because they allow your client to talk. And remember, the conversation is not about you, it's about your client. Unless your client is asking you, what experience have you got and everything else, and what have you done, they're giving you an opportunity there to talk about yourself. But what you're there to do is you're there to talk about the client, you're there to talk about the client needs, you're there to talk about what results they're looking to achieve, you're there to talk about all of those different things. So I think that's something that's really, really worth bearing in mind, and making sure that you know that is that's the case. So again, that's something else that I want to kind of highlight and make sure that you're aware of that side of it as well. So moving on to the actual qualification process itself. So everything that I do when I'm talking to people about sales, there is a process involved in what you do. It doesn't matter. In fact, in life, everything that you do has a process to it. If you need to boil an egg, what you do is you take the saucepan out of the cupboard. That's stage one. You then fill the saucepan up with water. That's stage two. You stick it on the stove. Stage three, you turn the stove on. Stage four, you wait for the water to boil. Stage five, you put the egg in there. Stage six, you put your timer on for 5 minutes. Stage seven. And then when the timer stops, you take your egg out. Stage eight. Everything has a process. Everything has a structure to be able to do what you're doing. Again, this is no different. So the first thing that you do is you start off with your opening question, your open-ended question, the first question that you ask: what, who, why, where, how, when. Something that starts with those. The next thing is you listen. You really, really listen to what's been said, and you listen to what the client has actually responded with. Make notes. Just sit there, listen. If they say something that you wish to explore further, make a note of it. Let them finish what they're going. Then what you can do is you can ask an exploring question. When they finish saying what they've said, finish that, start that exploring question. That allows you to really delve deeper into what's been said, and it allows you to ask more questions around the subject. Because when you ask that opening question, what you'll find is things that are coming out at that point are the things that are really, really important to that particular client. That exploring question allows you to really understand why that particular thing is very, very important to them, why why the outcome is very, very important, and everything. Again, what you don't want to do is interrupt. You actually want to listen more, and you want to let the client explain more. This is the next thing that you do. You have an empathy statement. What that does, that empathy statement allows you to understand, agree with what they're saying, build that rapport with them. It shows that you actually really understand their needs, and it shows that you really, really understand what they're talking about. Then what you do is you do that empathy statement, and then you go back to stage one again. So you ask another question. It might be another exploratory question. It might be another opening question where you wanting to explore a different line of inquiry or whatever it might be. But what you do is you keep repeating this process. You ask a question, you listen. You ask an in-depth question, you listen. Then you ask, and then you provide that empathy and that kind of thing. So it really is very much around that side of things, and that's kind of what you want to be doing, is just repeating that process over and over again until you have got all of the information that enables you to start putting a quote together and everything, and you really know where you're going. A little word of warning here, and I will be perfectly honest with you and tell you I'm particularly rubbish at this part. So try not to advise or give a solution on how to solve the problem at this point. I'm a very much a helping type personality, an individual that likes to support and help people. And I have been guilty in the past, and I've been in meetings with people where I've been kicked under the table by people that I've been with because I've divulged too much information at this stage. But try not to give advice or a solution on how to solve the problem that you're doing, because what you're trying to do here, this stage isn't about giving a solution. This stage is about you getting information out of the client as much as you possibly can. So the reason why this is so important is qualification basically is a foundation for the rest of the sales process. So the sales process, obviously you've got the stages that follow after that are the solution, or the pitching, or the quoting, whichever way you want to call, whatever you want to call it, the objection handling, and then the close. Now, all of the information that you have had and you've found out in the qualification side of things will set you up to provide the perfect solution for the client. They will have told you what their problems are. They will have told you the challenges that they're facing. They will have told you the impact that that's having on their business. They will have told you what the desired outcome, if the desired outcome would mean to their business, because they will have told you all of that information in the qualification section. Now, the key here is you use that information in the solution side of things, in the pitching side of things, and you use that to explain to them exactly how you can help them and what you can do for them. And that solution pitching element to it, that's really, really important, because actually you're providing them with a proper tailored solution for their business, answering their needs, and it shows that you have listened to exactly what they're trying to get. The next stage that you come to is the objection handling stage. So this is the point where the client receives your pitch, and they're at that point where they're actually turning around to you and saying, well, do you know what? I'm not so sure about this, or I'm not so sure about that, or I'm not so sure about the pricing, or I'm not so sure about, whether we would do it that way or we would do it this way. At this point, this is where you use all of that information that you've had out of the qualification side of things. So, for example, you might turn around to the client and say something along the lines of, well, actually, what I would like, what you mentioned to me when we spoke previously, you mentioned that these 5 things were really, really important to you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's what I've done, is I've included all of those things into the solution that I provided for you. They might turn around and say, yeah, but it's a bit too expensive for me, and we can't necessarily afford that. So what you would then do is you would do something called the takeaway close, which is literally you would say to them, okay, prioritize of those 5 things that you've said are very important to you. What's the most important to you, and what's the least important to you? So they might turn around to you and say, well, for example, I really, really need to get my website up and running as soon as possible. So that's really the most important thing to me. But actually, what really isn't as important to me is having a pay-per-click campaign, because I'm not so bothered about having a pay-per-click campaign on there. So what you could do is you could say, okay, well, what we'll do is we can build the website for you, and we can do the SEO for you on the website. But what we can do is we can put a hold on the pay-per-click campaign. What you're doing there is you're actually taking away one of the services that you're offering. So you're not dropping the price, you're just removing a service. So what you're doing is you're also retaining the value that you're offering somebody, and you're giving them a solution that works for them. That's something that you kind of do. And like I say, we call that the takeaway close. Sometimes what you'll do is you'll say, well, what's the most important to you of your 5 things? And they might turn around to you and go, well, actually, they're all equally important. And you say, well, that's what it is. That's how much it costs to get all of those things done. If it's over budget, it's over budget. But what you have to do here is you have to make sure that you give them the impression they will get value in doing that work with you. And whilst it may be more expensive than they can afford, if they want all of those things doing, then that's how much it's going to cost. What you should never, ever, ever, ever do at this point is drop your pants and drop the pricing, because what you're doing is you're devaluing your service, and you're making it as though people are able to talk you down on the pricing side of things. And what you've got to be is you've got to be confident in the service and the pricing that you're offering. And if you're able to do that and you're able to justify that, then that's the case. If they're going to quibble over price at this point, you might sit there and think, well, what else are they going to quibble over? And they might be that difficult client that you don't want to have. So that's the important thing there. And when you're closing, what you've done is you've given them everything that they want, and you've given them a solution for everything they want. You've handled the objections for everything they want. And at that point, basically what you're doing is you're saying, do you want to buy from me? So it's a fairly straightforward, when should we go ahead? I can fit you in next Tuesday, or however you want to do the close. But basically, that's the point that you're trying to do. So that's the thing that you want to be getting through. So just sort of like run through very quickly in summary. Do your research. Your research is really, really critical. It gives you a basis for the conversation. It actually gives you a basis for the conversation when you're starting off. Build that relationship with the individual that you're going to be working with. You want to build a relationship with them, and make sure that you do that. And you can do that through obviously the question and Q&A side of things. Ask questions. Ask questions, ask questions, ask questions. Remember, this isn't about what you want. This is about what they need. And I think that's really, 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 really important. It's about their needs, not your wants. And finally, remember, knowledge is power. The knowledge you get will serve you well in the latter stages of the sales process. And you will build, during that qualification element, you will build all of the knowledge that you need to make sure that you go through that. So I hope that makes sense. That, what I would like to ask is, has anybody got any questions that they would like to ask on that side of things? Tracy.
So you were talking about don't give them a solution. I'm like you. I like to help people. So you tend to give a lot away. How do you get around that? Because that's kind of you're at these meetings and they say we need this, and you're like, okay, great, we can do that. And then they're like, how are you going to do that? What are you going to do? And then you kind of like, and whereas sometimes I can say, they'll let you leave and go, I'll quote and put it all together. When they come straight out and ask you, how, I know it's practice, but where do you go with that?
So when people ask me, how am I going to do that, or what am I going to do, I will give them a very, very
High
overview
level.
outline,
Okay.
a very high level outline. So obviously in your case, with digital marketing and that kind of thing, what you would possibly do is you would talk about how you make the website, you'd make the website function. You wouldn't tell them actually how it's going to work, but you
Yeah.
would tell them the overall effect of what it's going to be. So what I tend to do is I tend to outline my process with people. So when people say to me, how are you going to help improve my business? What I would say to people is, well, what we do is first off, we start off with looking at the challenges that you're facing immediately within the business. We go through that and we look at those challenges, and then we put solutions in place that can help overcome those challenges that you've got. We then go into the next stage, which is like the planning stage, which is effectively looking at how we can move your business forward and where we can take your business to. And I've got some tools that we would work with to do that. And then the last stage that we would do is we then sort of go into that process of making sure those things happen and putting those things into place. So I'm telling them the process, but I'm not telling them how I do the process.
Cool.
So that's kind of the way that I would do that.
Awesome. Yeah, good. Thank you.
No worries. Does anybody else any other questions? Silence at the other end of the call. That's either a good thing or a bad thing. So that's basically the presentation. I appreciate everybody coming along. What I would say is a little bit about me. What I tend to do is I work with people on a one-to-one basis, and I also run groups of working with people as well. So I've got two types of groups that I work with people. One is the foundation for people who are fairly new to business, and people who want to build a business. So this is kind of like ideally for sole traders, the peer group side of things. And essentially what we do is we work through a program that essentially gives them the opportunity to build a firm foundation. And then I run mastermind groups as well, which is usually for more experienced business owners who are going through the typical day-to-day challenges that they have of running a business, and getting them into a room with other people who are in a similar position, and, you know, sharing ideas and various other bits and bobs. And then the BBA mentoring is basically me working with people on a one-to-one basis, understanding what their problems are with their business and how they're moving forwards. So if any of you on this call know anybody who maybe would fit that and fit with me personally, any introductions that you could potentially do would be fantastic. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a teaser. In January, I'm releasing something that is going to be an online platform that's going to be very much geared towards supporting small business owners and everything else. So I'm spending a lot of time working on that at the moment as well. But it just leaves me to say thank you very much to everybody for coming onto this call. I really do appreciate your time this morning. I hope that it's all sort of made sense to you, and you know, I've not sort of waffled on too much. And if anybody's got any questions, then please feel free to get hold of me and let me know. And I've just stopped the recording.